It was a quiet evening in the city, the kind where everything seemed to be operating like clockwork. The air was thick with the faint smell of rain and the distant hum of traffic, the sound of everyday life, nothing out of the ordinary. Inside his dimly lit apartment, Kyle settled onto the couch, remote in hand, ready to watch the game. The Atlanta Falcons versus the Carolina Panthers, a division rivalry that had always been exciting, filled with moments of tension and thrills. But something about this evening felt off. It wasn't the game, it was the atmosphere. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed deeper, more impenetrable than usual. His apartment, which had always been a sanctuary, felt colder than it had in weeks. He pulled the blanket tighter around his shoulders, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling that was creeping over him. Maybe it was just the weather, or maybe the stress from work was getting to him. Kyle flipped through the channels, muttering under his breath. The game wasn't on yet. He glanced at the clock, 7:15 p.m. It should have started by now. His fingers tapped nervously against the coffee table, and he glanced at the door, half expecting someone to knock, but no one ever did. The silence grew heavier. He reached for his phone, checking the schedule once more. The game was supposed to be airing on a local network, but the usual station was showing something strange. A black screen, no commentary, no pre-game analysis. A faint static buzzed from the TV speakers, then a low murmur. At first, he thought it was the wind, but as the seconds ticked by, it became clearer. It wasn't the wind. It was a voice, muffled but distinct, almost as though it were speaking just beneath the surface of the air. He turned the volume up, his curiosity piqued. Tonight's game. The stakes are high. The game. It's more than just a game tonight. The voice faded in and out, never quite clear, as though the transmission itself were being distorted. Kyle frowned, rubbing his eyes. It was probably just a glitch. He tried switching to another channel. Nothing. Everything was static or some strange black and white footage, like old tapes from a forgotten broadcast. Then the murmuring voice came again, sharper this time. Look at the field. Kyle's heart skipped a beat. The voice was louder now. There was no mistaking it. It was coming from the TV. The screen flickered once more. Suddenly, it switched to a view of a darkened football field, empty and still. The lights were dim, casting long, eerie shadows across the turf. The usual buzzing of the crowd, the pounding of the announcer's voice, was replaced by an oppressive silence. Something about it unsettled him. The empty bleachers, the fog creeping around the edges of the field, the odd shadows that twisted unnaturally across the grass. He leaned in closer, his breath caught in his throat. It was as though the stadium had been abandoned. But then, just as his hand reached to turn off the TV, the camera zoomed in on a single figure standing in the middle of the field. A man, tall, dressed in black, his face obscured by a helmet, but his posture rigid. It was unnerving. He stood motionless, as if waiting for something. The sound of the murmuring voice grew louder in the background, though the figure's lips did not move. They're here. Kyle felt a chill run down his spine, his skin prickling. His apartment felt colder now. The air, thick and suffocating, made it hard to breathe. He glanced nervously at the windows. Everything was dark outside, the city lights barely visible through the thick blinds. The figure in the field shifted. It wasn't a smooth movement. It was jerky, like it was moving in unnatural increments. The voice, now almost a hiss, whispered again. They always watch. Kyle's pulse quickened. The sound from the TV cut out completely, replaced by a faint, rhythmic tapping, almost like a heartbeat. He turned the volume up again, but the voice didn't return. Only that tapping. Louder now, like someone knocking on the door. He glanced toward the entrance of his apartment. No one. He tried to laugh it off. It was nothing, just the nerves getting to him. But the knocking continued. Relentless. Bang, bang, bang. Kyle stood up abruptly, his legs stiff, and moved toward the door. His hand hovered over the handle, but before he could open it, the knocking stopped, replaced by a low, groaning sound coming from the direction of the TV. The man on the field. Kyle spun around, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The figure was closer now, standing at the edge of the field, closer to the camera. Its body jerked unnaturally as it started to move toward the camera, the shadows around it stretching and distorting like something out of a nightmare. The murmurs became more distinct, forming into words. "You shouldn't have asked." Before Kyle could react, the room went black. The TV shut off and the lights in his apartment flickered once, before dying completely. It was pitch dark now, the only sound the frantic beating of his own heart in his ears. He stood frozen in place, waiting for something, anything, to break the silence. Then the knocking started again, louder this time, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of heavy breathing on the other side of the door. Thump, thump. Kyle swallowed hard, reaching for his phone. No signal. The knocking grew louder, more insistent, until it felt like the walls themselves were shaking. A low, gravelly voice, inhuman in its tone, whispered from behind the door. "Where will you watch next time?" And with that, the door creaked open on its own, revealing nothing but a pitch-black void beyond it. The TV flickered back on, and the figure stood, staring at him from the screen. Its helmeted face twisted into an impossible grin. The game had only just begun.